Hello, dudes and dudettes. It's me, your Uncle Herbie, and this is another edition of Wisdom After the Fall. This one is going to be a very hands-on how-to, and we're going to talk about whether you are a survivor, a survivalist, or a sucker. But before we get into that, I want to make a couple. This is going to be heavily financial, and I'm going to give a lot of financial advice. So I want to make a couple of things clear, given that I am a convicted criminal who is in the investment business, and so need to get out why you should believe me. Number one, I'm not selling you anything. I'm going to make some very specific recommendations. You might want to take notes on what's going on. And one of the reasons you can believe this is, first of all, before I destroyed myself in 2008, subsequent to the crash, I was a great financial advisor. You could probably even go to the victims of my crimes and ask them if I was good at what I did, and they would admit that I was. I made lots of them, lots of money for over 30 years. Number two, I have nothing to sell you. I'm not going to recommend anything that I have anything to do with. Yes, I'm going to mention some specific advisors and mutual funds and indexes in particular. Yes, I'm going to mention some specific investments, but I don't sell any of them and I have no affiliate links to any of them. And the reason you can believe what I'm saying is I've watched a lot of financial videos giving a lot of advice on YouTube. And there's always, even the ones that say there's nothing, nothing, we're not selling anything, nothing to buy. Always at the end, they're usually selling a seminar that you'll go to somewhere nearby where they'll close you into a very expensive multi-thousand-dollar course that you don't need. So let me just give you a couple truths about the investment business that I learned hands-on. It's all bullshit. Okay, it's an emperor has no clothes. None of these experts know anything about what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I've made some very lucky predictions. I predicted the 86 crash almost on the nose, the 87, and I predicted the 1999 2000 dot-com crash almost on the nose, and I predicted the real estate crash in 2008, even though I knew it was going to bring me down. And I can prove all of those things. There are videos and articles that I wrote in the Tucson Citizen at the time, and I can well corroborate I predicted all of those things almost on the button. In fact, if you read the bestseller that I wrote in 1999, How to Get Filthy Stinking Rich and Still Have Time for Great Sex, which I am not promoting, it's available on Amazon. I think it's just used copies that are left over from way back when. It was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal business bestseller, but I'm not trying to sell it. I get no royalties from it. If you want to buy it and read it, personally, it's outdated and it's toilet reading. But having said that, there was a chapter on the dot-coms, which were brand new in 1999, and I said they were going to bust in black and white. And I said, why? And I was exactly right. Now, today, I'm telling you now, we're going to have the bust that is coming, and I can't tell you what day it is. I'll tell you what I think the risk factors are in just a little bit. The bust that is coming, I believe, is inevitable. I don't think there's anything we can do to prevent it. I think we've dug ourselves, and when I say we, not just the United States, but most of the Western world, the civilized world, and the industrial world have backed ourselves into a horrible, horrible situation that we all should have seen coming but didn't. And that is basically we converted republics into democracies. We allowed people to vote for how much they get without paying for it. The countries all went in tremendous debt. And now GDPs around the world are below debt levels, which historically means there will be a global hyperinflation and ultimately a currency collapse. Now, I'll prove all of that in just a bit. And then I'm going to talk about how you can protect yourselves and what's the difference between a survivor, a survivalist, and a sucker. So, but the bottom line is the financial services business, all of these fund managers and things that they sell you and products and all of this is mostly to enrich the advisors. It's just to churn your money over and over again. And the more it's churned, the more they make. And the bottom line is this. I'm not going to try any of that. You can believe me. You cannot believe me based on my background. It's up to you. You want to think this is good advice? Great. But I'm going to tell you it's great advice. This is the advice that you should be given by the people that are advising you. And if they are, you've got really good advisors. There are plenty of honest and good advisors out there that know that their value is simply in telling you the truth in an industry that makes lying a habit. Okay, so let's get down into the nuts and bolts. Survivors, survivalists, and suckers. I am a survivor, not a survivalist. Okay, the difference is I don't think that our entire culture will come to an end when the depression comes. We're going to have a depression. It's going to be worse than the Great Depression because the Great Depression did not involve a complete currency collapse that we're going to have this time. and it's going to be horrible. And people's savings are going to be wiped out, and people are going to lose homes, and people are going to wind up on the street, and people are going to go hungry. But the lights will still be on, the grocery stores will still have food, the trains will keep running, the planes will keep running, some people will still have jobs, and it will not be a complete implosion. Now, the survivalists will argue with me about that, and they might be right. They're assuming, given the tribalization of our society, that the whole thing will break down and we all need to arm ourselves. Well, I think we all need to arm ourselves, and that's not a bad idea. And I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. And this is not a Second Amendment podcast, but if you're not armed, I would be, because they could be right. But I also don't think that's likely to happen. But I do think that you can adopt a lot of what survivalists talk about. And I'm not going to get into deep survivalist talk about enormous food stores on hand and enormous weapons caches on hand and preparing with generators and bug outs and where you're going to go and defending yourself against the neighbors and all that kind of stuff, and in urban environments and rioting. And I think in some cities there will be rioting, and I think because there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. And among those tough decisions, this is going to be the end of the welfare state. And when the welfare state ends, all of those people, about 30% of the population that basically don't contribute anything and take from the rest of us, are going to riot. Okay, and it's going to be tough, and we're going to have to put them down. But I just don't see the entire collapse of the civilization. I see the collapse of the economy and a major reset with lots of pain involved. And it's all caused by the government pandering to us in the end, who are voting ourselves benefits that we have no intention of paying for. If we're on the left, under the illusion that there's enough money from the billionaires to pay for this, and on the right, going along with it because power is more important, evidently, than any kind of ideology or morals or structure, because they're all sociopaths anyway. Most politicians are. And here we are. Now, let's get down into the nuts and bolts of this. And I'll be looking at the side every now and then, because while I do speak extemporaneously, and I am now, I do have notes. And I want to make sure this is all logical, and I've actually carefully prepared this because I want you to understand what's going on. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is a Fred chart. It's the Federal Reserve economic data, so you can believe it. This is honest to God economic data, and the chart you're seeing is the U.S. debt versus GDP over a very long period of time. And if you look at the chart and you look at it carefully and you look all the way over to the right, you'll see that our debt to GDP is over 120%. Now, historically, in the history of the world, since civilization began, this is when hyperinflation happens. There is no country that's ever had a debt over 100% of its gross domestic product that didn't end up sooner or later in a hyperinflation. The reason for that is really simple. All of this debt is caused by what we call entitlements. I'm sure in other countries they call them other things, but there's enormous amounts of money that we've committed to ourselves, that we're going to pay ourselves, that we think that people are simply entitled to because they breathe, and we've committed to it, but we can't afford it, and so we're borrowing money to do it. And there's going to come a fork in the road very, very soon that'll be set off by an unforeseen event. Now, how can I predict an unforeseen event? Because every financial crisis is kicked off by an unforeseen event. From the crash of 29 to the real estate crash in 87 to the dot-com crash in 99, and lots of crashes in other countries around the world. All these things happen with no warning. They just happen. Now, when I say they just happen, there are precipitating events. And if I had to guess what ours is going to be, my guess would be a Chinese economic collapse, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. And the reason that China is so important, even though the Trump administration has made an enemy out of them, I think needlessly, is that the bulk of world manufacturing, like it or not, still goes through China, and their collapse will disrupt supply chains globally to the extent that it'll be untenable, and that'll start a domino effect when everyone suddenly notices that they're all in the same position that China's in, and it becomes just a domino of loss of confidence. Remember, all of these fiat currencies, fiat is a fancy word for paper money, all of these currencies that are backed by nothing are backed only by the full faith and credit of the government. Now, the full faith or credit of the government, okay, is simply based on your confidence in it. Okay, and already, take a look at this chart. There are two companies in the United States that already have higher credit ratings than the U.S. government. Microsoft and Johnson & Johnson have better credit ratings than our government, and that shouldn't be possible. but it's because we've over leveraged ourselves to the point where it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, now what'll happen is the politicians will face their voters, and they'll have two choices. One, they'll say we have to drastically cut spending, and the other, they'll say, we can get it from the billionaires, but the real truth is that's code word for we're going to keep printing money, and they'll print it faster and faster and faster and faster, and they'll keep adjusting the cost of living adjustments, and they'll get behind the curve, and that's how hyperinflation happens. And all that money that has nothing productive attached to it, if you don't understand that, couple of videos ago, I did an entire video on productivity and how inflation happens, and I did my Robin Hood analogy a few videos ago you can watch, and all of that explains how inflation happens only through government action. Inflation is not caused by corporations. Inflation is not caused by, anything other than printing up too much money that's unproductive. And when there's not enough products and services in an economy to soak up all the money that's been printed, prices soak it up like a sponge does water. That's how it happens. That's the only way it happens. Okay, if we were on a gold standard, prices would be the natural the natural course of prices. The future of every price structure would always be downward because productivity is constantly improving, particularly with AI, which I spoke about in another episode recently. But anyway, so you can see that our debt to GDP is ridiculous. Now let's take a look at our debt versus the most populous countries in the world. And you see that our debt is pretty bad, but not the worst. There are some that are very, very, very bad and even worse. Now, China, if you look at this bar graph, it looks like it's much smaller than ours. And I said China is going to be where it comes from. But that's because China plays tricks. China, their actual national debt is about 300% plus of their GDP. How could it be that large? And the answer is they hide their national debt in their local and regional debt. So local and regional governments do most of the borrowing instead of the federal government, so they kind of hide it. So it looks like they have less than 100% of GDP committed to debt, although actually in most recent numbers, even in their official numbers, they're up to 100%. This chart is about a year old. It's the most recent one available that I could find anyway. But the bottom line is it's about 350%. China is the most indebted country that's ever existed in the history of the world. And they have the most collapsing demographics in the history of the world. In other words, their population is aging faster than any other country ever has. And they're not having children thanks to their own stupidity and the single child policy of the communist government, which just goes to show you how stupid central planners can be. And the hole they've dug themselves into is unrecoverable. It's just a matter of time. China has been spending years covering up no growth with imaginary growth and government projects funded by enormous amounts of debt. For example, high-speed trains between cities that nobody travels to. Okay, most of China, by the way, is dirt poor. Most of China, about 70% of it lives on about $1 a day. Okay, so China is not, you always see the pictures of the cities and the fast trains and all those things that our press puts out like that's the whole country, and it's not. That's just a few major cities. Anyway, so if it won't be, it'll just be a domino. It'll all happen at once. Now, there are other currencies that are much stronger and safer than the dollar. The reason we've been getting away with this all this time is because up until now, we've been the reserve currency of the world. After World War II, there was something called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Bretton Woods is in New Hampshire. It's a place in New Hampshire where the world governments got together. The United States promised to remain on a gold standard. And since we had so many dollars in circulation anyway, as a result of our rebuilding Europe and Asia after the war through the Marshall Plan and others, particularly in Japan, we had a lot of dollars in circulation. We were the only nation in the world willing to have that many dollars in circulation. So we became almost the default currency the reserve currency by default. And so we kept a bunch of gold and silver in Fort Knox, and it's still there. It's just not enough to cover all the currency that we put out. And that went along until 1971 when Richard Nixon, who decided he wanted to fight a major land war in Asia, Vietnam. At the same time, he wanted to keep supporting the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, as I spoke to in an earlier video. And guns and butter, you can't do it. You got to pick it. You got to decide if you're going to go to war or have a welfare state. And ever since then, it's not just Nixon. Every president, including this one, Trump, is conducting war while at the same time expanding the welfare state. And that's just untenable. And for those of you, by the way, I've mentioned this in other videos. I'll mention it again. The national wealth of the United States is about 100, when I say wealth, the money that's in all of our hands. that all of us have collectively, our savings and our 401ks and our houses and all that. Most of it's real estate, frankly. It's mostly our houses. Another bubble, too, by the way. The bubble now in real estate is worse than the bubble in 2008. It's just a disaster. This is, side note, worst possible time to own a house. If you own one, well, I'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, the bottom line is that it's about $188 trillion. Of that $188 trillion, $4 trillion of it belongs to the people that are in the bottom half of income earners. $4 trillion, so about 2% of assets. And that's why people have this perception that are making $70,000 and $80,000 a year, but they don't have savings, that they're falling behind, because they are. Because inflation inflated the values of stocks and bonds. A lot of people don't realize that the stock market is not way up because it's that great. It's way up because of inflation. That was the first thing that inflated, just nobody recognized it. Okay, that's why it's a massive bubble. And real estate absorbed all that extra money, and that's why the average price of a house is $500,000, because real estate absorbed all that money in an inflationary bubble. Okay, but all of those assets are owned by the top half of income earners. Now, the billionaires, people with $1 billion in net worth all the way up to our trillionaire, Elon Musk, they own about 4% of GDP. They have about $8 trillion. And the other $164 trillion is in the hands of the American middle class. Even if you drop what's wealthy down to, let's say, people with a net worth of $50 million, they control about 30% together with the billionaires of the assets held by Americans, and the other 70% is owned by the middle class. So don't kid yourself. The billionaires don't have enough money. If we took all of their money all at once to pay for all this crap that we think we're all entitled to, myself included, that includes Social Security when I say entitlements, it would last about 6 months. And then we'd be right back where we started. And we'd have millions more unemployed, because another word for a rich person is employer, and you cannot rob employers without having less and poorer paid employees. I don't know why people don't get that, but it's pretty damn simple. So we are on a fast track of, by the way, we were warned about this from the very, very start. This is why the founders set up a republic. There was a very famous Frenchman. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville. He wrote a book in the 1820s, maybe 1820s. Anyway, he wrote a book. He was a great admirer of America. And he said, the American Republic is wonderful, and it will last until they figure out they can vote themselves benefits they don't pay for. That was his warning not to become a democracy. That's why Athens started as a democracy and ended up being a republic. That's why Rome was a republic and not a democracy before the dictators took over. And why did the dictators took over? Inflation. Another discovery. They began to inflate their money too. Inflation brings down all great cultures. Rome was brought down not by barbarians, not by vandals, not by invading armies. It was brought down by inflation, the same way we'll be brought down. And the United States is about to lose its reserve currency status because all these tariffs and all this beating up on other countries hasn't made us any friends. And other countries see our debt picture, and other countries see what's going on, and other countries have better currencies. I mean, just take a look at the Danish kroner. They only have 27% debt to GDP. Now, they have a big welfare state, but they have a teeny tiny little population of about 4.5 million people, and they're all basically white guys. And so it's very easy to manage social welfare programs, at least better, easier, when you're only dealing with 1% of the population of the United States, and they're all one race. I say they're all white guys because they are, but they could just as easily be all black guys. When you're dealing with one culture, it's easier to make decisions and predictive models rather than the millions of ways that people think based on their cultures and backgrounds. And they pay for it all by the way, taxing the living crap out of their citizens. Their tax rates begin at 55% on the middle class, and they have North Sea oil, okay? And they have hydroelectric power from all the fjords and water and rivers and all that stuff. They're a blessed country. So there are lots of other currencies and lots of other countries, and when you look at that, at this chart, that are much, 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 much stronger than we are. And that's where they're going to go, because we have made no friends. Donald Trump has shit the bed all over our friends because he looked at the little picture and not the big one. But that's okay. There's nothing we can do about it. I don't say it's okay. It just is what it is. The deed is done. The die is cast. It's already happened. This is not a listen, you vote for who you want to vote for. You're a Republican. You're a Democrat. I don't care. Okay, just be smart. Stop electing morons. Okay, and morons are these sociopaths who constantly pander to us. Now, Now that we've gone through the disaster that's coming, I want to make some specific recommendations. And this is a fast video, and I'll go into these individuals more in future videos and get more broken down. This is a quick overview of what you should do, because when the shit hits the fan, or what I like to call the SHTF moment, shit hits the fan. I, by the way, stole that from the Survivalists. I did it because that's what's going to happen. The shit's going to hit the fan. Anyway, here we go. Here's some specific recommendations. Number one, I'm going to start with what most people are going to call the craziest one first. You need to have 90 days of a food supply on stock in your house on the shelf. And if you don't know what to get or how to get it or where to store it, our friends at the Mormon Church, the LDS, and by the way, for those of you who don't know this, I am the furthest thing from a Mormon. I'm actually a Jewish boy, but if there's one thing I know for sure, is that the Mormons have their survival thing down pretty pat. And on the Mormon LDS Church, LDS is Latter-day Saints, in case you're not familiar. There's lots of them out here in Arizona where I live, so I'm very, very familiar with the LDS Church. And look, my Christian friends who think Mormonism is a cult and are going to start writing comments about the cult and all of that kind of stuff, I don't care. Okay, I'm not here to debate religious points with you, okay? I do not want to enter that discussion. If there's one thing that you'll never get a video out of me on, it's on religion, okay? Either you believe it or you don't, okay? And I respect you whether you do or you don't. I myself am agnostic. I call myself agnostic because I think atheists are assholes who try to make everybody think they're stupid and wrong. And I just don't believe in that. I think that I could be wrong. Same reason I call myself a survivor, not a survivalist. I don't really think that the survivalist worst case scenario rioting in the streets will happen. I think the government has enough force to put down any riots that happen, and we'll transition through this. But as we transition through this, and it's going to be ugly and messy, it would be really good if you had 90 days food supply on hand. So the chart that I've put up, and it's available to you online from the LDS Church, go right to their website. It's right there, is a suggestion of what you should have on hand, how much water per person, how many beans, how much rice, what kind of canned goods, how they store, where you should store them. All that stuff is all there. So you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to convert to Mormonism. You can just go there and get the information. Plus, there are tons of survivalist YouTube channels that you can go out there and check out. I myself don't follow them because I think they're a little off the deep end with the paranoia. I just don't go that deep into paranoia. I've survived so many horrible things in my life, including prison, that I figure I can always survive one more. But that doesn't mean I'm glib about it. And you want to have 90 days food on hand. Hell, pardon me, Costco sells it, the freeze-dried foods and supplies. So, you know, like I'm far from the only one. And if you haven't done it, do it. Have not, because there are going to be supply chain disruptions. And it's going to be a lot less stressful if you have food on hand to weather those disruptions while things get organized, especially in the initial panic, than if you're left with no food at all. Okay, that's all I'm saying. What's the worst case scenario? You know, I always say that when you make a decision, you should look at what could happen. And in the best case, worst case scenario, I guess I should call it, is all these things happen and you eat this food and you're the safe one while your neighbors are starving and knocking on your door. By the way, I wouldn't tell and share with neighbors what you have and what you're doing. That might be a little paranoid, but look out for family first. There's empathy, but then there's suicidal empathy. Don't be so empathetic to your neighbors that you starve yourself and your children and your family, okay? So anyway, that's what I would do. Now, the second thing I would do, we're going to get out of the weeds on what you may think is crazy town, and I do not. Okay, look. Oh, I was going to say, what's the worst best case scenario? Is that you don't need the food and you end up eating it anyway. And by the way, I camp regularly. That's one of my favorite hobbies. I fish and I camp. I love those two things together. And the bottom line is this: freeze-dried food isn't bad. A lot of it's really good. So, you know, you try different brands, you see what's good, and you can get a lot of canned food. You can go to the dollar store and you get, you know, tons of canned food. There are expiration dates on canned food. I'll just say that this is just quick, but that's not really the expiration dates. That's just what the FDA tells them to put on the can. They have to have an expiration date, but a lot of it will last a lifetime. So you can learn what those are. You can go to these various sites. You can go to the LDS Church website, stock up food. It doesn't taste bad. Worst case scenario is you eat it. That's the worst case scenario. If you're wrong, you're still right. But if you're right, then you're the one eating while the neighbors are starving. Just saying. Okay, now, next. Let's take a look at what gold has done versus inflation. When we took the dollar off the gold standard, gold was still in existence. And you will see that gold has paced inflation and stayed ahead of it consistently, okay, all along until just recently. Right now, gold is outpacing inflation. And the price of gold, it looks like it's at an all-time high. I know you guys have been maybe noticing that, or many of you have. But it's going to go up much, 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 much higher. And the gap between the inflation rate currently and where gold is going to become much greater because inflation will take off dramatically and soon. And when that happens, gold prices will follow because people will flock to gold because most people think of gold as safe. What about Bitcoin? I am not anti-crypto. However, if you're going to be safe, don't be half-ass safe. I understand and agree that theoretically, at least, Bitcoin is the hardest money ever created because the supply of Bitcoin is finite, where we can always mine more gold, and there's lots of gold in the universe, and when we send out spaceships, we're going to find gold all over planets and asteroids, and we're going to be swimming in gold, okay, which will affect its long-term value to some extent. More supply, okay, versus whatever the demand is will affect the price of gold, versus Bitcoin, where there will only be 21 million Bitcoins forever and ever and ever and ever, and that's it, okay? There will never be more, which makes it theoretically the hardest currency ever, but it's still not really real, okay? It is real and it isn't real. It's real, it's just another form of confidence if you believe it's real and you want it, okay? And that's, I believe that we will want it and that it is real, but I could be wrong. And if you're going to be safe, don't be half safe, okay? It's kind of like, you know, why take the risk? Gold is a completely terrific alternative. You should have it on hand, okay? I mean, you should have it in your investment portfolio. I don't think you need to have it on hand. That's another thing. Your survivalist will tell you need to buy gold and keep it in your house and get a floor safe or a heavy safe and that's fireproof and turn your house into a fortress, basically. And I just don't buy that, okay? I think there's easier ways to buy gold. I'll talk about that in a minute that are perfectly safe because the world will not suddenly go up in flames when the shit hits the fan, okay? Once again, I say it. There will still be financial markets. The computers will still run. The lights will still come on. There will still be investments that go up, and those will be the things that are gold related. And you can buy them, and you can buy them without paying sales charges, and it's much easier. Okay, we'll get to that in just 1 minute. But you want to own gold. How much gold do you want to own? I think this is such a sure thing. First of all, if you're retired in my age, you have income needs. Okay. And you're probably looking at assets. I'll speak first to the retirees. It's just going to depend on the situation, is what I'm about to say, and your own risk tolerance and where you feel we are. And I'm not here to tell you what that is. If you need income from your investments, in other words, your pension and retirement income is not enough and you're retired, then what you want to do is set aside about 6 months of that income in cash. And when I say cash, in a plain old bank checking account. Don't worry about that you're not collecting interest on it. Again, don't be half-ass safe. Don't put it into money markets, which are invested into short-term U.S. debt, which could be heavily affected by a hyperinflationary period. It's usually very safe because it matures in less than 30 days. That's what a money market means, that it's made up of instruments that mature in less than 30 days. But it could also, there's a chance it could go wrong, okay, that its value could drop. And again, if you're going to be safe, don't be half-ass safe. The federal government insures those accounts to $250,000, FDIC, use an FDIC bank, and having it 6 months of your income in a plain old, no risk, entirely guaranteed, 100% bank money market account. Okay, that's so you can, bank checking account. Look, I contradicted myself. What a senile guy I am. Anyway, and then replenish it from your investment accounts as you need it. As far as how much gold to own, there's a big part of me that tells you all in. All the way. That's gold and silver is all you should own. By the way, silver you should own in the form of junk silver. You should go down to your local coin dealer. There are many of them that are reputable. They'll typically mark it up about 2 or 3% because they have to make a little profit. And they'll sell you what's called junk silver. Junk silver are unclad silver coins from back in the day before we started mixing copper and nickel into our coins so they weren't really silver anymore. So quarters and silver dollars and half dollars entirely. Were there silver dimes? I don't know. I'm not positive. You numismatic guys will have to let me know if that's the case. I don't really know. I'm not a numismatist. Tough word for me. Anyway, but that's a coin collector. Easier way to say it. Let's not be so fancy. Let me not be so. Oh, what an arrogance. Stop that, Herbie. Anyway, the silver is all chipped up. It's been in circulation. That's what they call it junk. It has no collector value, but it's worth what the silver's worth. And it's nice to have on hand because if things really do collapse, people will always take silver in payment for things. So, in times of great crisis, and let's say that, we went past 90 days of the food supply, you need to go buy more, you'll be able to buy it if you have junk silver. Okay. And it won't attract people to you to rob you like gold will if you walk in carrying gold ingots or gold coins. There's nothing, gold coins will be unbelievably valuable too, but you might as well hang out the rob me sign unless you want to go through life armed constantly, junk silver. And you should have on a substantial amount of it. But having said that, in real life, no one's going to really believe to go in 100% because I have, and I've admitted this to you before, I have absolutely no fear of risk. So I don't expect you to feel that way, and I expect you to mitigate your bets and not take this advice 100%. So the advice I would give if I were still an advisor, because I know who I'm dealing with is at this time I would have at least 25% of your assets in gold, and don't view it so much as an investment as an insurance policy. And if everything else turns to shit, and when the crash comes, the stock market is going to take a beating like you've never seen, and your house is going to lose value like you've never seen. And the only thing that is going to save you is the value of gold. And if you have about 25% of your assets, and when I say assets, I mean total assets, including your house, in gold. In other words, if your house is worth $500,000, let's say the national average, and you have a 401k with $500,000 in it, so you have $1 million, you should have $250,000 or half your 401k invested in gold. Okay, and everything else we'll get to in just 1 second. The rest of it, where would I invest it? I would go back to the chart that we talked about earlier when I showed you that for example, Microsoft and Johnson & Johnson had a better credit rating than the United States government, and there are plenty of other big U.S. corporations, and I'm going to put up a chart right now of various extremely good no-load mutual funds and indexes that you can buy that have little or no management fee whatsoever and no commission whatsoever. And you can pause the screen and take a screenshot or do whatever you want to do with these. I don't have any connection to any of them. These are names you're going to probably recognize. And at the bottom, there's a little note that says buy your gold through ETFs. An ETF is an exchange-traded fund. There is one on the New York Stock Exchange that the symbol is GLD, gold, just without the O. You can buy these shares through your favorite discount broker. I don't care who you use. Again, I have no connection to any of them. And you can buy GLD, and it's 100% gold. They're storing it and protecting it for you. You don't have to keep it in your house. And what it comes down to, a survivalist will say to you, hey, you can't do that. They're going to riot. They're going to come to you. And if you believe that, go down to your local coin dealer and buy the hard gold. And then before you do that, go see the locksmith and buy a really, really, really good safe. Either one that you can sink into the concrete of the foundation of your house so it can't be carried away when some burglar comes in and finds it hiding behind a picture and cuts it out of the wall, or unbelievably heavy, one of those great big giant ones. But for those of us, and don't ever use a safe deposit box because the government can shut them and seize it. And the government has seized gold before. Franklin Roosevelt seized gold during the 1930s. Okay, don't believe the government is your friend. It's not. It's what's causing this whole problem to begin with. Do not put things into other places that can get locked. Okay, so ETF, you pick the broker, use it to buy gold. Or if you're a little more paranoid than me, or you're more a survivalist than a survivor, then by all means, buy the hard gold. And that's what I do with the balance of your assets. I wouldn't buy any bonds now. When interest rates go up, bonds go down. Okay, it doesn't matter. When bond is a fancy word for debt, it's a loan. You're making a loan to somebody. A government bond is a loan to the government. A corporate bond is a loan to a corporation. If a loan is issued today, let's say at 5%, and interest rates go up to where they've been, even in our lifetimes, when I say us old guy lifetimes, I've seen interest rates as high as 21%. No one's going to buy your 5% bond from you if you need to sell it to get cash when they can buy a new one at 21%. So you're going to have to discount your bond so that the yield that your bond is paying equals 21%. So let me put this, that's pretty confusing, and there is a formula for this, but let me just try to explain it to you, and I think you'll get it, okay? let's say you buy a $10,000 bond. All bonds are issued in $1,000 denominations. So let's just say $1,000 bond. You buy a $1,000 bond, and or is it 10,000 and $1,000 increments? It's been a while. I kind of don't. Let's go with 10,000 because it's easy and round number to deal with. So it pays a 5% dividend, which means you're going to get a $500 a 5% interest. You're going to get $500 in income each year. This is why so many retirees hold government bonds and corporate bonds and municipal bonds, so that they can collect those monthly checks or quarterly checks or biannual checks. Different bonds pay different times, but this is where their income comes from. Okay, and I understand that. But here's what happens when the interest rates go up. Let's say interest rates go up to 10%. Let's not get dramatic. Let's say interest rates go up to 10%, which they certainly will. Okay, and you own a bond at 5%. Okay, well, let's say you need to sell that bond to replenish that account where you had your cash. You need some cash, or God forbid you had a cancer or a heart disease or some illness where you need to lay your hands on a bucket of cash, or someone's in a nursing. There could be a million things that can come up in life where you need to lay your hands on cash. So you go to sell that $10,000 bond, but now brand new bonds they can buy are paying 10%, and you're collecting $500 a year when if they bought a new bond, they could collect $1,000 a year on the same $10,000. So what you need to do is you'll have to sell them your bond at a 50% discount or for $5,000 so that their $500 a year of fixed income from it equals 10% of what they spent, not what you spent. You're screwed. This is why interest rates go up and bonds go down. Interest rates are going to go up. Bonds are going to get annihilated. If you're in bonds, you've made a really nice nickel for the last few years, get the hell out of them. Okay? Everything should either be in gold or incredibly high quality blue chip stocks bought through an index. Another thought on indexes, guys. I don't recommend mutual funds. I recommend indexes. Okay, indexes are basically they buy the securities that match the like, for example, if you buy an S&P index fund, it owns the stocks that make up the Standard & Poor's 500 in exactly the same weighting. There's no management involved. Okay, here's what they don't tell you. Over 95% of mutual fund managers don't beat their own indexes. They just don't. And when you subtract out their management fees of 1, 2, 3%, whatever it is, and God forbid you buy, a quick note here for particularly my retired friends, if anyone's trying to sell you an annuity or you own an annuity and you bought one, you're either going to be screwed or you've been screwed. Okay, annuities are for suckers. This is where we get into the sucker category. Okay, an annuity converts long-term capital gains into ordinary income. It's insane. Okay, so if let's say you have a CD coming due and your financial advisor says, I have this annuity, he tells you there's no sales charge, but there's a back-end penalty to get out, but he says, don't worry, there's always, you're not going to get out. This is a great investment, it pays a great income, yada, yada, yada. And it's all tax deferred. If you don't take it out, you don't have to pay any state or federal tax, but sooner or later, you got to take it out. Okay, now, let's say that you leave it in the annuity till you die. Okay, well, then your family gets to pay, or your survivor, your heir, your spouse, whoever gets the annuity is going to have to pay all the taxes on all that accrued interest because annuities don't step up at death. Versus, let's say you bought the stock index fund that I recommended from the chart that I showed you, and you put the exact same amount of money in it, and it went up in value and you died, then there's a step up in basis. In other words, your heirs inherited for the value on the day of your death, not for the value on the day you bought it and then owe the tax and all the gain. That's one stupid reason annuities are stupid. Now, if you have an annuity, if some advisor has sold you annuity inside of an IRA, or for you teachers out there that are retired, a 403B TSA plan, which literally stands for tax sheltered annuity, you're a double sucker because you're putting a tax deferred instrument into a tax deferred account. In other words, a 403B and a 401k and an IRA and similar kinds of what are called qualified accounts, IRS qualified to be tax deferred, in some cases tax deductible and tax deferred in the case of IRAs and 401ks and 403bs, you're already getting the tax deferral for free. Why are you paying the double management fees? Now, what the salesman will say is there's a death benefit. We guarantee that your family will get what you put in, even if you die, even if the market's down, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's great, except over the long term, and they're always going to be up. That's like a worthless guarantee. You're paying, let me tell you what's really going on. Annuities pay commissions without breakpoints. Okay, let me explain breakpoints to you. These are the little secrets of the financial industry. Breakpoints are, generally speaking, if you buy a loaded mutual fund, let's say you go down to your favorite financial advisor or stockbroker. I'll name one that I think is pretty reputable, Edward D. Jones. So let's say you go down to Edward D. Jones's office And you sit down, and they have a lot of at least decent human beings working at Edward D. Jones. They tend to be in smaller towns. Even when they're wrong, at least they're nice people. I don't think they're intentionally the thieves that some of the others are, just in my experience. Anyway, I would name a few names, but I don't want to get sued. So I'm just going to name the good one, Edward D. Jones. If you really want someone to hold your hand, that's probably where I'd go. Anyway, if you went down to Edward D. Jones, and what was I talking about? Was I still talking about annuities? Anyway, and I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, breakpoints. I was talking about breakpoints. Look, you know, does this happen to you? Is it just me? Sometimes when I'm walking from my kitchen to my living room, which isn't very far, I'll forget why I went, and vice versa. Ever happened to you? Anyway, let's talk about breakpoints. So let's say the broker at Edward D. Jones recommends to you one of the American mutual funds. I'm going to pick them because they're a huge fund group and very popular, and they're a very good fund group as loaded funds go. And their sales charge is right up front, and the maximum sales charge is somewhere around 5%. I forget. It's been a long time since I've been involved in it. But the more you invest, the less you pay in commission. That's called breakpoints. So there's a breakpoint at $50,000. There's a breakpoint at $100,000. I'm just pulling that out of what it used to be. It could be different now, but they're breakpoints. I don't think it's any different. The more you invest, the less you pay. Okay, and the broker is obliged to tell you where the breakpoints are. So when you go in to see the broker, and you have, let's say you have a CD coming due, and in your CD is $95,986, and he says to you, let's buy this fund, blah, 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 blah. He has an obligation to say to you, if you throw in another $5,000 from somewhere, it'll save you more in commission than the extra $5,000. Okay, that you're not going to have to pay. That's what a breakpoint is. They're obligated to tell you that. On an annuity, they tell you there are no commissions, but secretly there are no breakpoints. In other words, they're going to get typically a 10% commission is very typical in an annuity. That's why they have those long rear end penalties to keep your money tied up and those high management fees so they can earn back all that commission they fronted up front. Okay, and they are going to pay that to the broker no matter how much you invest. If you put $1 million in an annuity, they're going to get a $100,000 commission. That's why stockbrokers and financial advisors love annuities. They're always a ripoff. Always, always, always. And any of you financial advisors that want to come on my show, I'll send you a StreamYard link and I'll debate you straight up. You can call me criminal. I really don't care. I'll debate anybody straight up on why people my age should nobody should ever own an annuity. Never, 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 never. And also, life insurance is not an investment. Just saying. Not going to get into it. There are some fine insurance companies. If I had to pick one to do business with, for me, it would be Northwestern Mutual Life. I think they're an extremely well-run company that issue extremely good policies. And they have professional agents who know what they're doing and can help you with estate planning. But they're not investment advisors, and life insurance is not an investment or a savings plan. Don't be dumb. Okay. Now, for you younger people, same thing. This is no time to get aggressive. Same thing. As much gold as you can stand and the rest in high quality. This is not the time to roll the dice. Okay, we're about to go. And if you're thinking about buying real estate, don't. Okay, there's going to be a crash. And the crash is going to be so bad, it's going to make 2008 look like a happy memory. Only this time, there won't be Barack Obama and George Bush intervening to stop the crash. They won't be able to. We're out of capacity. We can't keep borrowing money. The rest of the world is caught on to our crap. And the crash will go all the way down. In 2008, they stopped the crash price levels at about 2001 pricing, when the bubble actually started in 1994 under the Clinton presidency in an insane government program that we won't get into now. But they stopped it before it really was allowed to run its course. And what you have to understand is that in a real capitalist system, if you prevent a recession, you're just going to get a depression later. We don't live in a capitalist system, my friends. We live in a crapitalist system. All you young people who think that you live in a capitalist system and it's unfair, you've never lived in a capitalist system. You have always lived in a crapitalist system. Crapitalist, which I didn't think of, it was written, I forget, I attributed my book, A Radical Reset, which, by the way, if you want to read more about anything I'm talking about, you can pick it up in my book, A Radical Reset. It's available to you on Amazon by me, Herby K, $2.99. What a bargain. I'm not here to sell the book. If you want to buy it, fine. If you don't want to buy it, that's fine too. Nobody's going to get rich at $2.99. Don't worry. I'm not here to take advantage of you and sell books. You don't have all this advice you can get right from here. You don't have to buy, but the book is great and you'll enjoy it. Anyway, having said all that, at least that was, again, arrogant, but I think it's great. It's at least funny. So, I think that's where I'm going to wrap it. Let's see. Is there anything else I want to cover today? But I'm spending LDS survivor and recommended funds investment. Yeah, that's about it. I think I've covered as much as I need to cover. Now you're going to probably have a lot of questions. Oh, um, I'm not going to go. I was almost going to discuss what comes after, but I'm going to leave that alone again for another podcast. If you want to take my advice, take it. If you don't want to take my advice, as I often say, it's worth exactly what you're paying for it, nothing. I'd love it if you like my advice at least, and if you think you got something out of it, to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. I've got, as I'm recording this, a whopping 31 subscribers. I started at 0 less than a month ago, so I feel like I'm hot, but I need to get to 1,000 to be monetized. So the biggest favor you could do for me, to pay me, whatever that means, is like, share, subscribe, do all that kind of good stuff. Anyway, I know I talked fast, but the beauty of a YouTube video is that you can go back and listen to it again. And I know I ran through a lot of information, and I know you probably have a lot of questions. Also, since we're pretty new into this course and this channel, if you do have questions and you post them in the comments, I will be more than happy. I will respond to them in the comments. As long as you don't call me, some derogatory thing. In fact, you know what? Call me what you want. You can say, "Hey, asshole, what did you mean by this?" I don't care. I'm here to help you guys. It's as simple as that. I don't want your money. I want your likes, your subscribes, and your questions. That's what I want. Anyway, until next time, have a beautiful day. I hope I didn't ruin your day with all this talk of gloom and doom, but it's coming. Whether we want to pretend it's coming or not, it's coming. You want to live in la la land? That's what suckers are. Okay, don't be a sucker. Be a survivor, or be a survivalist, but don't be a sucker. We're about to go through a period. Just as one last comment, historically, if you're a student of history, as I am, these things happen. There's always a disaster. And in every century, there's going to be a horrible disaster. And we like to think that 9/11 was like our disaster. And no, it wasn't. Okay, 9/11 was a disaster, but it's not the disaster. Neither was the crash of 2008. We're going to get our Great Depression, our World War equivalents. It won't be a world war, I don't think, but it will be a global depression. And it's going to be a global depression unlike the last one, because the money is not sound anywhere, is what I'm telling you. Okay. And by the way, this is the one last note I want to throw in. If you're going to buy foreign bonds, like of Norway, which is kind of a bargain, I'll put up this chart. The Norwegian bonds are paying 4%. Versus U.S. bonds, which pay more, but the Norwegian money is much, much safer. Like I said, you can buy Norwegian bonds and be very, very safe, but don't buy them in dollar-denominated mutual funds. Buy them in Norwegian currency, okay? A good financial advisor can walk you through that. Don't buy them in dollars. Convert your dollars to kroner and buy them in kroner. It's a sound value. Again, don't be half safe. It might be a little more expensive to buy those bonds that way if you want that income, particularly my retired friends, but you'll sleep at night a lot better when you have a currency where the national debt of the country is 27% as opposed to 100, well, now we're pushing 135%. This is untenable, unsurvivable, and it's getting worse every day. Okay, my friends, that's it for today. Thank you very much. I don't know what to tell you. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm not. Until next time, peace out.